Hey, welcome back. Today I made blondies, but there's weed in it. I adapted this recipe from Sugar Spun Run, so I'll leave that link in the description if you want to check it out. And I'm going to show you how to make 9 blondies with about 40 milligrams each. I started off by weighing out my weed. I'm hoping for 360 milligrams in the whole batch, and here's the equation I used for dosing. Next, I set my oven to 240, and while that is preheating, I'm going to start breaking up my weed. I don't grind the weed because I notice the flavor comes through a lot more when you do grind it, so I just break the nugs up into smaller pieces. Then I put this in the oven for about 35 minutes, and while that is decarbing, I get started on melting my butter. I'm adding half a cup of butter to a saucepan and melting that on a very low heat. I want to make sure it doesn't get too hot and is sitting stably around 185 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit before I add in my weed. When my weed is ready, I'll add it into the butter and give it a little stir. I'm going to be cooking this for about 2.5 to 3 hours and checking this temperature regularly. I want to make sure that it is sitting around that 185 to 200 degree range for the entirety of the cooking process. I'm also going to be stirring it about every 30 minutes or so. When it's finished cooking, I just strain out the weed, and I have a little bit less than half a cup, so I'm going to add about 1 more tablespoon of regular melted butter to this, so it will be enough for my recipe. Next, I'm going to mix my sugars, so I'm adding half a cup plus 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and 1/4 cup of white sugar, and then I'll just mix that together. Next, I add in my melted can of butter, and I'll whisk until that's fully combined. Next, I add in 1 egg and 1 additional egg yolk, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and then whisk until those are fully incorporated. Next, I'm preparing my dry ingredients, so I'm starting with 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons of flour, 1 teaspoon of cornstarch, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then I'll just mix those together. Next, I'll add my dry ingredients into my wet ingredients. I'm using a spatula and adding my flour in parts to make it a little bit easier. And our final batter will be a pretty thick batter similar to brownies. The final step is adding half a cup of white chocolate chips. I'm just mixing those and making sure to scrape the bottom of the bowl so that they will be fully incorporated throughout our batter. Next, I set my oven to 350, and while it's preheating, I'm going to move my batter into the pan. I lined my pan with parchment paper to make it easier to remove at the end, and I used a spatula to move all of the batter towards the edges of the pan. Lastly, I decided to add a handful of chocolate chips to the top just to make it look nice. And then we'll bake it for about 25 to 30 minutes. Here's what it looked like at the end, and I used a toothpick to test that it was finished in the middle. I cut mine into 9 squares and they were ready to go. Like I said, these should be about 40 milligrams each, but with homemade edibles, it is hard to tell. If you're unsure how much to eat, start with half and wait a while, and keep in mind that it can take up to 2 or 3 hours for edibles to fully kick in. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments. If you decide to make these at home, I would love to see pictures. You can find me on Instagram, and as always, thank you guys so much for watching.